The first raindrops hit the cracked pavement like tiny explosions of dust, each one a promise that things were about to get worse. I pulled my threadbare jacket tighter around my shoulders and glanced at Lily, who skipped ahead of me, her small hands already grimy from the morning's work. My 7-year-old daughter, so innocent, yet already hardened by a life that had taught her to search for treasure in other people's garbage. "Mama, look." She held up an aluminum can triumphantly. "This one's not even squished." I forced a smile. "Good job, baby. Put it in the bag." The recycling center paid by weight, and every ounce meant another meal, another day with electricity, another small victory against the crushing poverty that had become our existence. I hadn't always lived like this. 3 years ago, I'd been Hannah Mills, waitress at the Pearl, a high-end restaurant downtown. I'd had an apartment, dreams of community college, and a future that, while not glamorous, had at least seemed possible. Then I'd met James, the charming sous chef, with the dazzling smile and endless promises. 9 months later, Lily had arrived, pink and perfect. 2 months after that, James had disappeared, along with the money I'd saved for Lily's first year, leaving nothing but a hastily scrawled note claiming he couldn't handle fatherhood. The rain fell harder now, and Lily's excitement faded as water soaked through her worn sneakers. "I'm cold, Mama." "I know, sweetheart. Just a little longer, okay? We need to fill this bag before we go home." Home was a generous term for our one-room apartment, in a building that should have been condemned years ago. We turned down Madison Avenue, where the wealthy residents often discarded recyclables without bothering to claim the deposits. As Lily darted toward a promising pile of garbage bags outside an upscale building, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. A sleek black SUV had pulled to the curb half a block away, the kind with windows tinted so dark they reflected the gray sky like obsidian mirrors. "Lily, wait," I called, suddenly uneasy. In our neighborhood, vehicles like that usually meant drugs or worse. The rear door opened, and a man stepped out. Even from this distance, I could feel the air change around him. He moved with the fluid confidence of a predator, every step deliberate beneath an expensive black overcoat that fell to his knees. Dark hair swept back from a face that seemed carved rather than born, all sharp angles and hard planes, devastatingly handsome in a way that promised danger rather than comfort. I'd seen men like him before, usually surrounded by deferential staff at the Pearl. They were the ones who never looked at the prices, who ordered the oldest wines, who left tips larger than my weekly salary. Men who owned the world and knew it. 2 larger men followed him, positioning themselves at a respectful distance, their eyes constantly scanning the street. Bodyguards. My stomach knotted. Whoever this man was, he was important enough to need protection. "Lily," I hissed again, more urgently. She ignored me, having spotted something promising in the garbage pile. The man paused on the sidewalk, speaking into his phone. Then, as if feeling my stare, he looked up. Even across the distance between us, his eyes locked with mine, dark, intense, and somehow both cold and burning at once. A shiver that had nothing to do with the rain raced down my spine. I tore my gaze away, forcing myself to move toward Lily, who had pulled something from the pile. A discarded doll with tangled blonde hair, surprisingly clean despite its location. "Can I keep it, Mama? Please?" Her eyes lit up, and my heart broke a little. She had so few toys. "We'll see, baby. Let's get back to work now." But Lily had already hugged the doll to her chest, twirling in a circle of 7-year-old joy. Her foot caught on an uneven section of sidewalk, and she stumbled, falling hard onto the wet concrete. The doll flew from her grasp, skidding across the pavement and coming to rest directly in the path of the dark-haired man. "Lily!" I rushed to her side as she began to wail, more from surprise than pain. "Shh. It's okay, baby, you're okay." I helped her up, checking her scraped hands and wet clothes. In my focus on my daughter, I didn't notice the man approach until his shadow fell over us. My head snapped up, every instinct screaming danger. He stood unnervingly close, the doll dangling from his long fingers. Up close, his presence was overwhelming. The subtle scent of expensive cologne, the perfect cut of his suit beneath the open coat, the aura of absolute authority. His face was even more striking than I'd first thought, with high cheekbones, a strong jaw dusted with perfect stubble, and eyes so dark they seemed to swallow light. "I believe this belongs to your daughter," he said, his voice a low rumble that matched his appearance perfectly, cultured, controlled, and somehow threatening despite the polite words. Before I could respond, Lily wiped her tears and looked up at him. "Thank you, mister," she said, reaching for the doll. Something strange happened then. The man froze, his eyes fixed on Lily's face with an intensity that made me instinctively pull her closer to me. For a fraction of a second, something like shock crossed his features before his expression smoothed back into unreadability. "What's your name?" he asked Lily, still holding the doll just out of reach. Every maternal alarm bell in my body began clanging. "We need to go," I said firmly, standing and pulling Lily with me. "Thank you for picking that up, but we don't need it." His eyes shifted to me, and I felt physically pinned by his gaze. "I'm simply being polite," he said, the softness of his tone belied by the steel underneath. "It's a simple question." One of his bodyguards had moved closer, his hand inside his jacket in a way that made my mouth go dry with fear. "I'm Lily," my daughter said, oblivious to the tension crackling in the air. "I'm 7. That's my doll now. I found her." The man crouched down to Lily's level, a movement so unexpected it left me momentarily speechless. "Hello, Lily," he said, his voice gentler now. "I'm Antonio, and yes, this is definitely your doll." He handed it to her, then looked up at me. "And your mother is?" I shifted uncomfortably under his scrutiny. "We really need to go. The rain's getting worse." He stood, towering over me. "You're collecting recyclables," he stated, glancing at our half-filled bag. Not a question. "We're fine," I said, my voice sharper than intended. "I didn't ask if you were fine," he replied, a hint of amusement in his voice that only heightened my unease. "I'm offering assistance. We don't need charity." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Pride is admirable, but foolish when your child is cold and wet." I bristled, anger temporarily overriding fear. "Don't presume to tell me how to care for my daughter." Something dangerous flashed across his face, and I realized too late that this was not a man accustomed to being challenged. One of the bodyguards stepped forward, but Antonio halted him with a nearly imperceptible gesture. "My car is right there," he said, nodding toward the SUV. "Let me drive you home. It's pouring now." As if on cue, the rain intensified, and Lily pressed against my side, shivering. I hesitated, torn between instinctive caution and the practical reality of our situation. We were still miles from home, and Lily was already soaked. "I have a better idea," I countered, desperation making me bold. "If you're so concerned, you could just give us money for a taxi." A smile curved his lips, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I don't trust taxi drivers in this weather. I insist." The word insist hung in the air between us, and I suddenly understood this wasn't actually an offer. The realization sent ice through my veins. "Mama, I'm cold," Lily whimpered, and my resolve crumbled. "Fine," I said tersely. "But just a ride home. That's it." Antonio nodded once, as if my acquiescence was never in doubt. "Of course." As one bodyguard opened the SUV's door, and the other took our recycling bag without asking, I had the distinct feeling I'd just made a terrible mistake. But with Lily shivering against me, and the rain now falling in sheets, I had no choice but to accept the devil's hand. The interior of the SUV was warm and smelled of leather. Lily climbed in first, her eyes wide as she settled into the plush seat. I followed reluctantly, keeping her close to my side. Antonio sat across from us, his presence somehow filling the spacious interior. The doors closed with a solid thunk that sounded disturbingly final. "Where do you live?" he asked as the vehicle pulled smoothly away from the curb. I gave our address reluctantly, watching his expression. A flicker of recognition crossed his features, quickly masked. "That's Baltic Heights," he said. "Not the safest neighborhood for a child." I stiffened. "It's what we can afford." He studied me with those penetrating eyes. "And what do you do when you're not collecting recyclables?" "I clean offices at night," I replied reluctantly. "Lily stays with a neighbor, and during the day, I look for better work, hence the recycling." He nodded slowly, then turned his attention to Lily, who was stroking the doll's hair with reverent fingers. "Do you like school, Lily?" "Sometimes," she answered. "I like reading class, and I'm good at math." "Is that so?" Something in his voice had changed, becoming almost gentle. "She's very bright," I said, unable to hide the pride in my voice. "Top of her class despite everything." His eyes met mine again, and this time I thought I detected something like approval. "Children are resilient. They shouldn't have to be," I replied softly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The rain drummed on the roof, and Lily hummed quietly to her new doll. "What happened to her father?" The question was asked casually, but I sensed a tension beneath it. "He left," I said shortly, "when she was 2 months old." Antonio's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. His name? The personal questions were making me increasingly uncomfortable. "That's not relevant to anything. Humor me." I shifted uneasily. James Donovan. He was a cook at the restaurant where I worked. He stole my savings and disappeared. End of story. Antonio's expression didn't change, but something in his posture did. A coiling of energy, like a predator catching a scent. "I see." The SUV slowed as we approached my neighborhood, the elegant vehicle jarringly out of place among the dilapidated buildings and graffiti-covered walls. When we pulled up to my apartment building, Antonio studied the crumbling facade with an unreadable expression. "Thank you for the ride," I said firmly, eager to end this strange encounter. I reached for the door handle. "Wait." His command stopped me instantly. He removed a business card from his inner pocket and held it out to me. "If you need anything, call this number, day or night." I stared at the card. It was black with a single embossed phone number in silver. No name, no company. "Why would you help us?" His eyes moved to Lily, who was reluctant to leave the warm car. "Let's just say I have a particular interest in seeing children properly cared for." He paused. "Especially children who show promise." I took the card cautiously, not believing for a second that his interest was purely charitable. Men like him didn't help people like us without expecting something in return. "What's your name?" he asked again as I tucked the card into my pocket. I hesitated, then decided giving my first name couldn't hurt. "Hannah." "Hannah," he repeated, as if testing how it felt on his tongue. "Take care of Lily. And yourself." With that cryptic parting, we exited the SUV. As soon as we stepped out, one of the bodyguards handed me our recycling bag, now mysteriously heavier than before. The vehicle remained at the curb, engine idling, as we walked to the building entrance. Only when we were safely inside did I hear it drive away. In our tiny apartment, I emptied the bag and gasped. Mixed in with our recyclables were several crisp $100 bills. More money than I made in 2 weeks of night cleaning. As Lily played with her new doll in the corner, I sat on our worn sofa, turning Antonio's card over in my fingers, wondering what kind of man carried that much cash, traveled with bodyguards, and took an interest in a little girl collecting trash on Madison Avenue. I should have thrown the card away. Instead, I tucked it into the back of my wallet, telling myself it was just in case of emergency. But deep down, as the rain continued to fall outside our window, I knew with inexplicable certainty that I hadn't seen the last of Antonio. The next morning dawned clear and bright, as if yesterday's rain had washed the world clean. I'd barely slept, Antonio's intense gaze haunting my dreams. The money he'd slipped into our recycling bag was hidden beneath the loose floorboard under my bed. $2,000 in crisp hundreds. Part of me wanted to use it immediately. Pay our overdue rent, buy Lily new shoes, stock our nearly empty refrigerator. But another part, the cautious survivor I'd become, warned that nothing came without strings. "Mama, can I take Sophia to school today?" Lily stood in our tiny kitchen area. Already dressed in her cleanest uniform, the rescued doll clutched to her chest. She'd named it immediately and spent the evening whispering secrets to it. "I don't think that's a good idea, baby. She might get lost or dirty." Lily's face fell, but she nodded with that too-adult understanding that always broke my heart. "I'll keep her safe at home." She carefully placed Sophia on her pillow, before grabbing her worn backpack. After walking her to school, I headed to the local diner where I sometimes picked up breakfast shifts. The owner, Marge, was a tough but fair woman who'd given me work when I desperately needed it. "Sorry, Hannah," she said when I asked about extra hours. "Business is slow. I can barely give my regulars their usual shifts." I thanked her and left, the weight of our situation settling back onto my shoulders. The cleaning company only needed me 3 nights a week, and even with the recycling, we were always one emergency away from disaster. As I walked home, a black SUV crawled alongside me, matching my pace. My heart stuttered as the rear window lowered, revealing Antonio's unmistakable face. "Good morning, Hannah," he said, as if our meeting was the most natural thing in the world. I stopped walking, anger overriding my initial fear. "Are you following me?" He smiled, the expression transforming his severe features into something dangerously appealing. "I was in the neighborhood. That's not an answer." His smile widened. "I wanted to check on you and Lily, make sure you were all right after yesterday's rain." "We're fine," I said tightly. "And I don't need checking on." "Get in," he said, ignoring my objection. "I'd like to talk to you." "I have nothing to say." His eyes hardened slightly. "It wasn't a request, Hannah." A chill ran through me as I realized we were attracting attention from passers-by. The last thing I needed was trouble in my own neighborhood. 5 minutes, I conceded, approaching the vehicle. The door opened from within, and I slid into the leather seat, immediately enveloped by his presence. He wore a different suit today, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored to his broad shoulders and lean waist. His cologne was subtle but distinctive, something expensive and custom-made. "Where's Lily?" he asked as the SUV pulled away from the curb. "School," I replied, wondering why he cared. He nodded approvingly. "Education is important." The vehicle turned down an unfamiliar street, and alarm flared through me. "Where are we going?" I said 5 minutes. "I'm hungry," he stated matter-of-factly. "We're going to have breakfast." "I'm not hungry," I lied, my stomach choosing that moment to betray me with an audible growl. Antonio raised an eyebrow, but didn't comment on the obvious falsehood. "I insist." There was that word again. Insist. Said softly but with immovable force. We arrived at a small, exclusive-looking restaurant tucked away on a side street I'd never noticed before. The host's eyes widened when Antonio entered, and we were immediately ushered to a private table in the back. No words were exchanged, but a bottle of sparkling water and 2 cups of coffee appeared instantly. "You come here often," I observed. "I own it," he replied simply, studying the menu despite not having opened it. My eyebrows shot up. "You own a restaurant." "I own many things," he said, his dark eyes meeting mine over the rim of his coffee cup. A waiter approached, standing at a respectful distance until Antonio acknowledged him with a slight nod. "The usual for me, Marco, and for the lady." He looked at me expectantly. "Just coffee is fine," I said, uncomfortable with his presumption. "She'll have the crepes with fresh berries, a side of the house-made sausage, and a glass of fresh orange juice," Antonio corrected smoothly. As the waiter departed, he added, "You need to eat." I bristled at being managed. "I'm capable of ordering for myself." "Evidently not, since you were going to have just coffee despite being obviously hungry." His tone was maddeningly reasonable. I leaned forward, keeping my voice low. "What do you want from me, Antonio? People like you don't help people like me without expecting something in return." He regarded me thoughtfully, taking a sip of his coffee before answering. "What kind of person do you think I am, Hannah?" The question caught me off guard. "Wealthy, powerful, dangerous," I replied honestly. "Not someone who picks up strangers in the rain out of kindness." A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Perceptive. But you've missed something important. And what's that?" "I am also exceedingly curious." He leaned back as the waiter returned with our food. "And your daughter fascinated me." My protective instincts flared. "Leave Lily out of whatever this is." His expression darkened. "Don't mistake my interest for something unseemly. I would never harm a child." The conviction in his voice was startling, as was the flash of genuine anger in his eyes at my implication. "Then what do you want?" I pressed, even as the aroma of the food in front of me made my mouth water. He gestured to my plate. "Eat while we talk." I reluctantly took a bite of the crepes, which were possibly the most delicious thing I'd ever tasted. Antonio watched with satisfaction as I continued eating, unable to maintain my resistance in the face of such expertly prepared food. "I have a proposition for you," he said finally. I tensed, my fork pausing midway to my mouth. "I'm not that desperate," he laughed, the sound rich and unexpectedly genuine. "Not that kind of proposition, Hannah. I'm offering you a job." "A job," I repeated skeptically. "My regular housekeeper is taking a leave of absence for health reasons. I need someone reliable to manage my residence. The position includes accommodation for you and Lily." I blinked in surprise. "You want me to be your maid? You don't know anything about me." "I know enough," he countered. "You're hardworking, resourceful, and fiercely protective of your daughter. Those are qualities I value, and we would live in your house?" The idea seemed absurd. "In the staff wing. You'd have your own suite, 2 bedrooms, a private bathroom, and a small sitting area. The salary is $20,000 a month, plus benefits including health insurance for both of you, and a college fund for Lily." I nearly choked on my orange juice. $20,000? That's ridiculous for housekeeping. His expression remained impassive. "I value competence and discretion. The salary reflects that." I set down my fork, my appetite suddenly gone. "What's the real reason you're offering this? And don't say it's because you were impressed with how I collect recyclables." Antonio studied me for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. "Let's just say I see potential in you. And in Lily." "That's not an answer. It's the only one you'll get for now." He pushed a folder across the table that I hadn't noticed before. "The details of the position, including responsibilities and compensation. Review it and let me know your decision by tomorrow." I didn't touch the folder. "And if I say no?" Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "That would be unfortunate, for both of us." The implied threat hung in the air between us. But when he spoke again, his voice was gentler. "Hannah, I'm not offering charity. I need someone for this position, and you need a better life for your daughter. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement." I reluctantly took the folder. "I'll think about it." "Excellent." He signaled for the check, which appeared instantly. After signing it, he stood, buttoning his suit jacket in one fluid motion. "My driver will take you home. I can walk." "In this neighborhood? I think not." He offered me his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, I took it. His palm was warm and surprisingly calloused, not the soft hand of someone who'd never worked. The contact sent an unexpected current up my arm. He held on a fraction too long before releasing me, his eyes holding mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. The ride back to my apartment was silent, my mind racing with the implications of his offer. It was too good to be true, which meant there had to be a catch. Men like Antonio didn't make generous offers without hidden motives. When the SUV pulled up to my building, Antonio handed me a cell phone. "This is for you. My number is programmed in. Call me with your decision." I stared at the sleek device. "I have a phone." "This one is secure," he said, as if that explained everything. As I stepped out of the vehicle, he added, "One more thing, Hannah. I had someone look into James Donovan." I froze, turning back to face him. "What? Why?" Antonio's expression was unreadable. "The man who abandoned you and Lily doesn't exist. At least not as you described him. There's no record of a James Donovan working at the Pearl or any other restaurant in the city during that time period." My mind reeled. "That's impossible. I lived with him for almost a year." "Which means he lied to you about his identity." Antonio leaned forward slightly. "I can help you find out who he really is, if you accept my offer." He closed the door before I could respond, the SUV pulling away smoothly from the curb. I stood there clutching the phone and folder, feeling as if the ground had shifted beneath my feet. Back in our apartment, I opened the folder with trembling hands. The contract inside was detailed and professional, outlining duties that seemed straightforward: managing the household staff, overseeing meal planning, ensuring the residence ran smoothly. The compensation package was even more generous than Antonio had described, including educational benefits for both Lily and me. I paced our tiny living room, arguing with myself. Taking the job meant placing myself and Lily under Antonio's control, in his home, subject to his rules. Refusing meant continuing our precarious existence, always one mishap away from homelessness. And then there was the matter of James. Had he really lied about everything? The possibility made me sick to my stomach, but also explained the ease with which he'd vanished from our lives. If Antonio could help me discover the truth. The sound of knocking interrupted my thoughts. Opening the door, I found Mrs. Petrovich, our elderly neighbor, who sometimes watched Lily. "Hannah, dear, the landlord was here," she said, her voice quavering with distress. "He says everyone must leave by the end of the month. They're demolishing the building." My blood ran cold. "What?" "He can't do that without proper notice." She shook her head sadly. "He doesn't care about legalities. Says he has powerful friends who'll make sure it happens no matter what." After she left, I sank onto our worn sofa, Antonio's folder still in my hands. The timing couldn't be coincidental. Was this his doing? Creating a situation that forced my hand? I pulled out the new phone and stared at it, conflicted and afraid. If I called him, I was stepping into a world I didn't understand, aligning myself with a man whose power and motives remained mysterious. If I didn't, I was condemning Lily to continued hardship, possibly even homelessness. When I picked Lily up from school that afternoon, her excited chatter about her day faded when she saw my expression. "What's wrong, Mama?" she asked, her small hand tightening in mine. I forced a smile. "Nothing, baby. I just have a lot on my mind." "Is it about the man from yesterday? The one with the car?" I glanced down at her in surprise. "Why would you ask that?" She shrugged with childish innocence. He looked at me funny, like he knew me. A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean, sweetie?" "Just funny. Like," she scrunched up her face, searching for the right words, "like when Miss Garcia sees me at the grocery store and is surprised I exist outside of school." I laughed despite my unease. I'm sure it wasn't like that. But as we walked home, her words echoed in my mind, like he knew me. Had Antonio recognized something in Lily? A resemblance to someone he knew, perhaps? That night, after Lily was asleep, I sat in the dim light of our kitchenette, Antonio's phone in my hand. The eviction notice had been slipped under our door while we were out, 30 days to vacate, no exceptions. Even if it was illegal, fighting it would require money for a lawyer we didn't have and time we couldn't spare. My finger hovered over his number. Whatever game Antonio was playing, he held all the cards, and now, it seemed, he had orchestrated circumstances to ensure I had no choice but to play along. With a deep breath, I pressed call. He answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting. "Have you decided, Hannah?" His voice was low and smooth, confidence evident in every syllable. I closed my eyes, feeling like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. "Yes, I'll take the job." "Excellent." I could hear the satisfaction in his tone. "Be ready tomorrow morning at 9. My driver will collect you and Lily. Pack only what you need immediately. Clothes, personal items, anything of sentimental value. Everything else can be replaced." "Tomorrow?" "That's too soon. Lily has school and I need to—" "I've already arranged for Lily's transfer to Westwood Academy," he interrupted. "It's 5 minutes from my residence and far superior to her current school. As for your other obligations, consider them handled." My head spun at how quickly he was taking control. "You can't just decide these things without consulting me." "I believe I just did." His tone softened slightly. "Hannah, this transition will be easier if you don't fight me on every detail. I'm trying to help you." "Why?" I demanded. "Why are you doing all this?" There was a long pause before he answered. "Let's just say I'm investing in your future. And Lily's." Before I could press further, he added, "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be a busy day." The line went dead, and I sat in the silence of our shabby apartment, wondering if I'd just made a deal with the devil. But as my eyes fell on Lily's sleeping form, her arms wrapped around her new doll, I knew I'd make the same choice 1,000 times if it meant giving her a better life. Whatever Antonio's true motives, whatever secrets he was keeping, I would discover them. And if necessary, I would protect my daughter from him, just as I'd protected her from everything else in her short, difficult life. Outside, the moon cast silver light through our cracked window, illuminating the small space that had been our home. Tomorrow, everything would change. For better or worse, we were now bound to Antonio and whatever future he had planned for us. 9 o'clock the next morning found us standing on the curb outside our building, surrounded by 4 suitcases containing our meager possessions. Lily clutched Sophia in one hand and my fingers in the other, her eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "Are we really going to live in a mansion, Mama?" she asked for the 10th time since I'd explained our situation in simplified terms. "I don't know if it's a mansion exactly," I hedged, though based on everything I'd seen of Antonio so far, it probably was. "But it will be nicer than here and you'll have your own bedroom." Her eyes widened. A whole room just for me? The thought of such luxury, a luxury that should be every child's right, made her practically vibrate with excitement. I smiled despite my anxiety, her joy momentarily eclipsing my misgivings. The now familiar black SUV appeared precisely on time, followed by a second identical vehicle. Both drivers emerged simultaneously, moving with military precision to load our luggage into the second SUV. "Ms. Mills," the first driver said with a slight bow of his head. "Mr. Ricci is expecting you at the residence." Ricci. So that was Antonio's last name. Italian, as I'd suspected from his first name and olive complexion. The driver opened the door, and Lily scrambled in eagerly while I took one last look at the dilapidated building that had been our home. For all its flaws, it represented independence, safety, and anonymity. Walking away felt like surrendering something vital, even as I recognized the necessity. The drive took us from our neighborhood to increasingly affluent areas of the city, finally winding through streets lined with mansions hidden behind high walls and elaborate gates. After 20 minutes, we turned onto a private road that curved through immaculately landscaped grounds before revealing Antonio's residence. Mansion didn't begin to cover it. The house, if such an understated word could be applied to this structure, was a modern architectural masterpiece of stone, steel, and vast expanses of glass, perched on a hillside overlooking the city. 3 stories of angular elegance surrounded by meticulous gardens, with what appeared to be a separate guest house visible through the trees. "Holy cow," Lily whispered, pressing her nose against the window. "It's like a castle." The SUV stopped at the base of wide stone steps leading to massive front doors. As we exited the vehicle, those doors opened, and Antonio himself emerged, flanked by a middle-aged woman in a simple gray dress. He wore casual clothes today, dark jeans and a black cashmere sweater that somehow looked as formal and imposing as his suits. The change in attire did nothing to diminish his commanding presence. "Welcome," he said, descending the steps to meet us. His eyes swept over me briefly before settling on Lily with that same intense scrutiny I'd noticed during our first encounter. "I trust the drive was comfortable?" "Yes, thank you," I replied stiffly, hyper-aware of my worn jeans and simple blouse next to his obvious luxury. Antonio gestured to the woman beside him. "This is Mrs. Winters, my estate manager. She'll be your direct supervisor and will show you around today." Mrs. Winters offered a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Welcome to Ravenswood, Ms. Mills." "Ravenswood?" I echoed. "The name of this property," Antonio explained, his hand coming to rest briefly on my lower back as he guided me toward the entrance. The casual contact sent an unexpected warmth through me despite my reservations. Inside, the foyer soared 3 stories high, dominated by a spectacular spiral staircase and illuminated by a crystal chandelier that must have cost more than I'd earned in the past 5 years combined. Lily gasped audibly, her grip on Sophia tightening as she tried to take in everything at once. "This is amazing," she breathed, her voice echoing slightly in the vast space. Antonio's expression softened as he looked down at her. "Would you like a tour, Lily?" She nodded enthusiastically, then glanced at me for permission. I hesitated, but nodded. Antonio extended his hand to her, and after a moment's consideration, she took it. The sight of my daughter's tiny fingers engulfed by his large hand sent a complicated mix of emotions through me. Wariness, certainly, but also a strange sense of rightness that I immediately tried to suppress. "Mrs. Winters will show your mother the staff wing and her duties," Antonio said to Lily. "You and I will explore the parts of the house you might enjoy most, the library, the game room, perhaps the indoor pool." "There's a pool inside the house?" Lily's eyes threatened to pop out of her head. Antonio chuckled, a rich sound that transformed his severe features. Indeed there is. Shall we? As they moved toward a corridor on the right, I stepped forward instinctively. I should come with you. Antonio turned back, his expression unreadable. Mrs. Winters needs to brief you on household protocols, and I promised to transfer Lily's academic records today. I thought you might appreciate the time to settle in while I learn more about her educational needs. The reasonable explanation did nothing to ease my discomfort at being separated from my daughter in this unfamiliar environment. But before I could object further, Lily tugged excitedly on Antonio's hand. Can we see the pool first? She asked. Her earlier shyness completely evaporated. Of course, he replied, with a warmth I hadn't heard in his voice before. As they walked away, he placed his free hand protectively on Lily's shoulder, and I caught his murmured words. I think you're going to like it here, little one. Mrs. Winters cleared her throat discreetly. If you'll follow me, Ms. Mills, I'll show you to your quarters first so you can freshen up. Then we'll discuss your responsibilities. I followed her through a different corridor, trying to memorize our route through the labyrinthine house. The staff wing, as Antonio had called it, was accessed through a discreet door that led to a separate section of the mansion. While less ostentatious than the main house, it was still more luxurious than anywhere I'd ever lived. Our suite consisted of a comfortable living area, with a small kitchenette, 2 generously sized bedrooms, and a gleaming bathroom with both a shower stall and a soaking tub. The furniture was high quality and tasteful, the bedding crisp and inviting, the closets already partially stocked with new clothes in both my size and Lily's. Mr. Ricci had these delivered this morning, Mrs. Winters explained, noting my surprised expression. He said you would need an appropriate wardrobe for your position here. I ran my fingers over a silk blouse that probably cost more than a month's rent at our old apartment. This is excessive. Mr. Ricci expects his staff to present a certain image, she replied neutrally. You'll find a uniform for your work duties in the closet as well, though he mentioned you're free to dress casually when not performing official functions. After giving me a few minutes to inspect the space, she led me on a tour of the mansion's service areas, the industrial kitchen where a chef and his assistants were already preparing lunch, the laundry facilities, the staff dining room, the security office where stern-faced men monitored an elaborate system of cameras covering every inch of the property. The security team is extensive, I observed as we passed another guard stationed discreetly in a hallway. Mrs. Winters' expression remained impassive. Mr. Ricci values his privacy and safety. What exactly does he do? I asked, trying to sound casual. For work, I mean. She gave me a measured look. Mr. Ricci has diverse business interests. Import-export, real estate, hospitality, among others. Your employment agreement includes a confidentiality clause. I suggest you review it carefully. The implied warning was clear. Don't ask questions. But that only intensified my determination to learn exactly what kind of man now controlled our lives. We concluded the tour in a wood-paneled office where Mrs. Winters outlined my duties in more detail. I would be responsible for coordinating the household staff of 12, managing schedules, overseeing inventory for household supplies, and ensuring everything ran smoothly. Mr. Ricci travels frequently but entertains at home several times a month, she explained. These events require meticulous planning and discretion. His guests are often influential individuals who value their privacy. I understand, I said, though I wasn't sure I did. What kind of influential individuals required such careful handling? Politicians? Celebrities? Or something less legitimate? I should mention, she continued, her tone slightly softer, that Mr. Ricci rarely takes such a personal interest in his staff. Your position here is unusual. I met her gaze directly. In what way? She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. In the 15 years I've managed this household, he's never personally recruited someone for a position, nor has he ever installed staff members with children in the main residence. Then why me? Why now? Mrs. Winters shook her head. That's not for me to speculate on. I simply thought you should be aware that your situation is unprecedented. Our conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a security guard at the door. Mrs. Winters, Mr. Ricci requests Ms. Mills's presence in the study immediately. My heart rate accelerated. Is Lily all right? The child is fine, the guard assured me. She's with Marta in the kitchen, helping make cookies. Relief washed through me, followed quickly by irritation that Antonio had once again separated me from my daughter without consultation. The guard escorted me through the house to a set of double doors guarded by 2 more security personnel. They opened the doors without knocking, revealing a spacious study dominated by floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a massive desk behind which Antonio sat, phone to his ear. He motioned me inside without pausing his conversation. "I don't care what it costs," he was saying, his voice cold and clipped. "Find him. Use whatever resources necessary." He listened briefly, then added, "No excuses, Marco. I want results within 48 hours. He ended the call and set the phone down deliberately. "Hannah," he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. "Please, sit." I remained standing. "Where's Lily?" "Making chocolate chip cookies with my chef," he replied. "She's perfectly safe and quite enjoying herself. Please sit. We need to talk." Reluctantly, I took the offered seat, acutely aware of the power dynamic between us. Antonio studied me for a moment, his dark eyes unreadable. "Your daughter is remarkable," he said finally. "Intelligent, observant, resilient. You've done well with her despite your circumstances." "Thank you," I replied cautiously, uncertain where this was heading. He leaned forward slightly. "I've enrolled her at Westwood Academy starting Monday. It's the best private school in the city." My eyebrows shot up. "Private school? That wasn't part of our agreement. Consider it a benefit of your employment," he said smoothly. "The education she'll receive there will open doors for her future, doors that would otherwise remain closed." I couldn't argue with his logic, but his unilateral decision-making continued to unsettle me. "You should have discussed it with me first." "Would you have objected to giving her the best possible education?" "Of course not, but then there was nothing to discuss." He opened a folder on his desk. "I've reviewed her current academic records. She's significantly ahead of her peers in mathematics and reading comprehension. With proper guidance, she could be truly exceptional." His interest in Lily's academic potential struck me as strange. "Why do you care so much about my daughter's education?" Antonio's expression shifted subtly, something like regret flickering across his features before disappearing. "Let's just say I recognize untapped potential when I see it." "There's more to it than that," I pressed. "You've gone to extraordinary lengths for us. This job, this living situation, now an expensive private school. What do you really want?" He closed the folder deliberately and met my gaze directly. "I told you I'm looking into James Donovan. I've discovered something interesting." The abrupt change of subject caught me off guard. "What about him?" "The man you knew as James Donovan was actually called James Mitchell. He worked as a line cook at the Pearl for exactly 3 months before disappearing. Before that, his employment history is suspiciously vacant." My breath caught. "How do you know this?" "I have resources," he said simply. "Mitchell also abandoned 3 other women in similar circumstances over the past decade. Different names each time, same modus operandi, charm, move in, steal, disappear. Anger and humiliation washed through me. So I was just another mark, so it would seem." Antonio leaned back in his chair. "But there's more. Mitchell isn't his real name either. His actual identity is proving elusive." I shook my head, struggling to process this information. Why would someone go to such lengths? He wasn't even stealing that much money. Antonio's expression darkened. Perhaps money wasn't his primary motivation. A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean?" Before he could answer, a soft knock at the door interrupted us. It opened to reveal Lily, her face and clothes dusted with flour, her eyes bright with excitement. "Mama, I made cookies." She rushed to my side, then remembered her manners and turned to Antonio. "Thank you for the tour, Mr. Antonio. Your house is amazing." His severe expression instantly softened. "You're very welcome, Lily. And please, just call me Antonio." "Antonio," she repeated, testing the name. "Marta says dinner will be ready in 30 minutes. She made lasagna because it's Italian like you." He chuckled, the sound surprisingly warm. "Did she now? Well, I'm sure it will be delicious." He rose from his desk. "Why don't you show your mother to your suite so you can both clean up for dinner? We'll continue our conversation later, Hannah." I stood, taking Lily's flower-covered hand in mine. As we turned to leave, Antonio called after us. "Hannah, one more thing." I paused, looking back at him. "I have guests arriving tomorrow evening. Nothing formal, just a few business associates. I'd like you and Lily to join us for dinner." It wasn't a request. "Is that part of my job description?" A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Consider it an opportunity to see how the household functions during an event, and for me to introduce you properly to my circle." With that cryptic statement, he dismissed us with a nod, as Lily led me through the mansion, chattering excitedly about everything she'd seen. I couldn't shake the feeling that Antonio was playing a game whose rules I didn't understand. That evening, after sharing a surprisingly relaxed dinner with Antonio and several staff members in the informal dining room, I tucked Lily into her new bed. She fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from the day's excitement and surrounded by luxury she'd never known. I returned to the living area of our suite to find a package on the coffee table that hadn't been there before. Inside was an elegant black dress, matching shoes, and a note in bold masculine handwriting. "For tomorrow evening." Anger flared at his presumption, but curiosity won out. I held the dress against me, noting that it was exactly my size. The material was exquisite, the design sophisticated yet understated, expensive without being ostentatious. A soft knock at the door startled me. I opened it to find Antonio standing there, his tall frame filling the doorway. He'd changed from his casual clothes into dark slacks and a crisp white shirt open at the collar, looking effortlessly elegant, even in this relaxed state. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice low. I hesitated, acutely aware that I was alone with him, Lily asleep in the next room. "It's late." "It won't take long." Reluctantly, I stepped aside. He entered, his presence immediately making the spacious suite feel smaller. His eyes fell on the dress still in my hands. "It suits you," he observed. "Though I haven't seen it on you yet." "It's too much," I said, setting it down carefully. "Like everything else you've done." He moved further into the room, stopping beside the large window that overlooked the city lights below. "You should get used to it, Hannah. This is your life now." "For how long?" I challenged. "Until you tire of your little charity project? Until you find someone more interesting to rescue?" Antonio turned to face me, his expression serious. "This isn't charity, and you're not a project." "Then what am I? Why am I really here?" He took a step closer. "I told you. I'm investing in your future. And Lily's," I added. "You seem particularly interested in my daughter." Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, perhaps, or guilt. "She reminds me of someone I once knew." It was the first genuine, unguarded statement he'd made since we met. I pressed the advantage. "Who?" Instead of answering, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded paper. "My people found this today. It's a birth certificate for Lily, the original, not the copy you have." My heart skipped a beat. "How did you get that? Those records are sealed." "As I said, I have resources." He unfolded the paper and held it out to me. "Look at the father's name." With trembling fingers, I took the document. There, in official typeface, was a name I'd never seen before. Antonio Ricci. The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. This is a mistake, or a forgery. James was Lily's father. Antonio's expression remained steady. "The man you knew as James used my identity when registering Lily's birth. Perhaps to avoid being found if child support was ever pursued." "That's impossible," I whispered, though a horrible suspicion was beginning to form in my mind. "How would he even know your name?" "Because he worked for me," Antonio said quietly. "James Mitchell was employed by one of my companies as a courier. He had access to my personal information, including identification documents." The room seemed to spin. I sank onto the sofa, the birth certificate clutched in my hand. "So all of this, finding us, bringing us here, it was because you thought you might be Lily's father?" Antonio sat beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat from his body. I knew I wasn't her biological father, but seeing my name on that document created a responsibility I couldn't ignore. A responsibility I repeated hollowly. Is that what we are to you? His hand covered mine, warm and surprisingly gentle. You're much more than that, Hannah. Both of you. I pulled my hand away, anger replacing shock. Stop playing games. Tell me why we're really here. Antonio was silent for a long moment, his dark eyes searching my face. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. The truth is more complicated than you can imagine. He stood, moving back to the window. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be another long day. And just like that, he was gone, leaving me with more questions than answers, and a birth certificate that made no sense. I stared at the elegant black dress he'd provided, wondering what other surprises awaited me in this beautiful, dangerous new world. Outside my window, the city lights blurred as tears of frustration filled my eyes. Whatever Antonio's real motives, whatever secrets he was keeping, I was now entangled in a web of his making. And somewhere in that web lay the truth about Lily's father, and the mysterious man who had so suddenly and completely taken control of our lives. Morning sunlight filtered through the elegant curtains of our suite, painting golden patterns across the floor. I'd barely slept, my mind racing with questions about Antonio, the birth certificate, and what it all meant for Lily and me. I'd examined the document repeatedly during the night, looking for signs of forgery, but it appeared authentic in every detail. Lily, oblivious to my turmoil, woke with unbridled enthusiasm for another day in our new home. Can we go swimming in the indoor pool today, Mama? Antonio said I could use it whenever I want. I smiled despite my unease. Maybe later, baby. I have to learn my new job today, and we need to get you settled in. After breakfast in the staff dining room, where several household employees welcomed us warmly, Mrs. Winters appeared to continue my orientation. Lily was whisked away by a young woman named Elisa, who was apparently the household tutor, to assess her academic level before Monday's school start. Mr. Ricci requested that Lily spend the morning with Elisa, Mrs. Winters explained, noting my hesitation. He wants to ensure she's properly prepared for Westwood Academy. I bit back my objections. Fighting every decision Antonio made would only create tension, and for now, Lily seemed happy and well cared for. Better to choose my battles carefully. The morning passed in a whirlwind of introductions and explanations. I met the entire household staff, the chef and his 2 assistants, the 3 housekeepers, the groundskeeper and his team, the chauffeurs, and some of the security personnel. Everyone was professional and competent, though I noticed they all shared a certain wariness when speaking about Antonio, respect mixed with what might have been fear. Mr. Ricci has exacting standards, the head housekeeper told me diplomatically when I asked about his temperament as an employer. He rewards excellence generously, but does not tolerate mistakes. By midday, my head was spinning with information. I joined Lily for lunch in a sun-filled conservatory, relieved to find her animated and excited about her morning. Elisa is so nice, Mama. She says I'm really good at math, and she gave me books to read before school starts on Monday. And guess what? Antonio came to see what we were doing, and he helped me with a really hard problem. Her eyes shone with admiration. He's super smart. I tried to ignore the pang of jealousy at how quickly Antonio was winning her over. That's wonderful, sweetie. I'm glad you're enjoying your lessons. After lunch, Mrs. Winters showed me to Antonio's private office, where I would apparently be working when not supervising the household. A sleek desk with a computer had been set up in a corner of the spacious room, positioned so that I would have my back to his larger desk. Mr. Ricci prefers to have his household manager nearby for immediate consultation, Mrs. Winters explained, her tone neutral, but her eyes conveying something unspoken. I'm to work in his office? I asked, uncomfortable with the arrangement. Isn't that unusual? As I mentioned yesterday, your position here is unprecedented. She hesitated, then added in a lower voice, a word of advice, Ms. Mills. Mr. Ricci is not a man who accepts boundaries easily. He takes what he wants and arranges the world to suit his preferences. I suggest you adapt accordingly. Before I could press her for clarification, the office door opened and Antonio strode in, followed by 2 men in expensive suits. He paused briefly when he saw us, his eyes lingering on me with an intensity that made my skin warm. Hannah, he acknowledged with a slight nod. Mrs. Winters, Please show Ms. Mills to the kitchen. Marta needs assistance planning next week's menus. It was a clear dismissal. As we left, I caught fragments of the men's conversation. Something about shipping containers and customs inspections. Business talk, seemingly legitimate, though the serious expressions and lowered voices suggested otherwise. The afternoon passed quickly as I familiarized myself with the household routines and schedules. By evening, I felt marginally more prepared for my role, though questions about Antonio and his interest in us continued to plague me. As instructed, I dressed for dinner in the black dress Antonio had provided. The fit was perfect, the material draping elegantly over my curves without being too revealing. The matching heels added 3 inches to my height and an unexpected boost to my confidence. I styled my hair in a simple updo and applied minimal makeup, wanting to look professional rather than attempting to impress. When I emerged from my bedroom, Lily gasped. "Mama, you look like a princess." She herself wore a new dress, a deep blue velvet with a satin sash that made her look older than her 7 years. "You look beautiful too, baby. Did Elisa help you get ready?" She nodded happily. "She did my hair, and Antonio sent the dress especially for me. Isn't it pretty?" Another gift. Another decision made without consulting me. I swallowed my irritation, unwilling to dampen Lily's excitement. "It's gorgeous. Shall we go? We don't want to be late." We followed a staff member to the main dining room, an imposing space with a table that could seat 20, now set for 8 with fine china, crystal, and silver. Antonio stood at the far end, deep in conversation with a distinguished older man. He looked up as we entered, and for a moment, his carefully controlled expression slipped, revealing something raw and hungry in his gaze, as it traveled from my face down the length of my body. He recovered quickly, excusing himself from his companion to greet us. Tonight he wore a perfectly tailored black suit with a charcoal shirt and no tie, the top buttons undone to reveal a hint of tanned skin at his throat. The effect was devastating, formal yet somehow intimate. "Hannah," he said, taking my hand and bringing it briefly to his lips in a gesture that seemed both old-fashioned and startlingly sensual. "You look exquisite." Heat crept up my neck at the compliment and the casual touch. "Thank you for the dress," I said stiffly. "It wasn't necessary." "I disagree," he murmured, his eyes holding mine a moment longer than was comfortable, before he turned to Lily with a genuine smile. "And you, little one, look like a proper young lady tonight." Lily beamed up at him. "Thank you for my dress, Antonio. It's the prettiest one I've ever had." "You're very welcome." He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Come, let me introduce you both to my guests." The other attendees were an eclectic group. The older man I'd noticed earlier, introduced as Judge Harmon, a sleek, elegantly dressed woman named Sofia Vega, who apparently ran a chain of luxury hotels, a sharp-eyed man called Mikhail Petrov, with a slight Russian accent, and 2 younger men who were clearly subordinates to Antonio, introduced simply as Vincent and Marco. Throughout the introductions, I noticed the curious glances directed our way, particularly from Sophia, whose perfectly manicured eyebrow raised fractionally when Antonio presented me as Hannah Mills, my new household manager. No one questioned our presence or Lily's, though I caught significant looks exchanged between the judge and Sophia. Dinner was a sumptuous affair prepared by Antonio's chef. The conversation flowed easily, touching on politics, art, and business ventures that sounded legitimate enough, though there were occasional cryptic references I couldn't decipher. Antonio dominated the table naturally, his charisma and intelligence evident in every exchange. I found myself watching him, fascinated by the way he commanded respect without apparent effort. Lily, seated beside me, was on her best behavior, using the correct silverware and speaking only when addressed directly. I noticed Antonio watching her with something like pride, particularly when she answered Judge Harmon's question about her favorite subjects at school with remarkable articulation for a 7-year-old. "She has quite a mind," the judge observed, glancing meaningfully at Antonio. Remarkable resemblance, too. Antonio's expression remained neutral, but I felt him tense slightly beside me. Indeed. After dessert, Lily began to fade, her excitement giving way to tiredness. Antonio noticed immediately and gestured to one of the staff members, hovering discreetly near the wall. "Hannah, Elena will take Lily to your suite and help her prepare for bed. I'd like you to join us for drinks in the library. It wasn't a request. I kissed Lily goodnight, watching as she sleepily took Elena's hand and left the dining room. When they were gone, Antonio led the group to a richly appointed library where a butler was already setting up a bar. "Scotch for the gentlemen, I believe," Antonio directed. "Sophia, your usual martini, and for Hannah." He paused, looking at me inquiringly. "Just water, thank you," I said, wanting to keep my wits about me. As the drinks were served, the conversation shifted subtly, becoming more guarded, yet somehow more intimate. I stood slightly apart from the group, observing rather than participating, aware that I was being assessed by Antonio's associates. Sophia approached me, martini in hand. "So?" she said without preamble. "How long have you known Antonio?" "Just a few days, actually," I admitted. Her perfectly arched eyebrows rose. "Fascinating. He doesn't usually—" She trailed off, studying me more intently. "You have no idea who he is, do you?" Before I could respond, Antonio appeared at my side, his hand coming to rest possessively at the small of my back. "Sophia, I see you're getting acquainted with Hannah. Just girl talk," she replied smoothly, though her eyes remained sharp and assessing. "She's refreshingly uninformed." Antonio's fingers pressed slightly against my spine, a warning, or perhaps a reassurance. "Hannah has other qualities I value more than knowledge of our world." "Clearly," Sophia murmured, her gaze flicking meaningfully to his hand on my back. With a knowing smile, she drifted away to join the others. "What did she mean?" I asked quietly, turning to face Antonio. "About your world." His dark eyes studied me, calculating something I couldn't decipher. "My associates move in exclusive circles, Hannah. Sophia was simply noting that you're an outsider you've deliberately brought inside," I pointed out. "Why?" Instead of answering, he guided me to a quieter corner of the room. Judge Harmon was impressed with Lily. The abrupt change of subject was becoming a familiar tactic. "He seemed to think she resembles you." Antonio's expression remained carefully neutral. "Many children have dark hair and eyes." "Is that all it is?" Because he seemed to be implying something more. For a moment, I thought he might actually give me a straight answer. But then Marco approached, murmuring something about a call that required Antonio's immediate attention. With a brief apology, Antonio excused himself, leaving me alone among strangers who clearly knew more about my situation than I did. I used the opportunity to circulate around the library, pretending to admire the extensive collection of books while eavesdropping on conversations. Most were innocuous, but I caught fragments that raised my suspicions further. References to territories, shipments, and the commission. The older man, Judge Harmon, eventually joined me by the bookshelves. "Antonio tells me you're a single mother," he said without preamble. "That must have been challenging." "We managed," I replied, uncomfortable with his scrutiny. He nodded thoughtfully. "And the girl's father? Not in the picture, I understand." "No, he left when she was an infant." The judge sipped his scotch. "A shame. A child needs a father." He glanced toward the door through which Antonio had disappeared, though perhaps that's being remedied. Before I could question his meaning, Antonio returned, his expression grim. He made directly for me and the judge, his body language tense. "We have a situation," he said in a low voice to the older man. "Marco will brief you. If you'll excuse us, Hannah and I need to speak privately." Without waiting for a response, he took my elbow and guided me firmly from the library and down a corridor I hadn't seen before, eventually stopping before a heavy wooden door secured with an electronic keypad. He entered a code, and the door swung open to reveal what appeared to be a private study, smaller and more personal than his formal office. "What's happening?" I asked as he closed the door behind us. "Is something wrong?" Antonio crossed to a cabinet and poured himself a drink. "My men have located James Mitchell," he said abruptly, "or whatever his real name is." My breath caught. "Where?" "In a town about 3 hours from here, living under yet another false identity." He turned to face me, his expression hard. "He's married with a 2-year-old son." The news hit me like a physical blow. While I'd long since stopped loving the man who'd abandoned us, the confirmation that he'd simply moved on to create another family, another life that didn't include Lily, was painful. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. Antonio set down his glass and moved closer. "Because I'm going to confront him tomorrow. And I want you to come with me." "What? Why would I do that? Don't you want answers?" His eyes searched mine. "Don't you want to know why he used my name on Lily's birth certificate? Why he targeted you specifically?" The questions had been haunting me since Antonio showed me the document. "Of course I do, but then be ready at 9 tomorrow morning." His tone brooked no argument. "My security team will watch Lily. She'll be perfectly safe here." I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the room's comfortable temperature. "What are you going to do to him?" Antonio's expression darkened. "That depends on his answers. You can't hurt him," I said quickly. "Whatever he did, violence isn't the solution." A bitter laugh escaped him. "You have no idea what I'm capable of, Hannah, or what he deserves." Fear crawled up my spine, not for myself, but for what might happen tomorrow. "I won't be part of something illegal or violent. You won't have to be." He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne and the faint scent of scotch on his breath. "But you deserve to look him in the eye, to hear the truth from his own lips." I wanted to refuse, to insist on staying with Lily, but curiosity and a burning desire for answers overrode my caution. "Fine, I'll go, but only to talk." Antonio smiled, a predator's smile that sent a shiver through me. "Of course." He reached out suddenly, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from my face with unexpected gentleness. "The dress suits you perfectly," he murmured. I knew it would. The abrupt shift in conversation and the intimate gesture caught me off guard. "I should check on Lily," I said, taking a step back. "Of course." His hand fell away, but his eyes remained intent on mine. "Rest well, Hannah. Tomorrow will be illuminating." I left him there, my mind reeling with questions about what the morning would bring. In the quiet of our suite, I found Lily already asleep, Sophia clutched in her arms. I sat on the edge of her bed, watching her peaceful face and wondering how our lives had changed so drastically in just a few days. What connected Antonio Ricci, powerful and dangerous man, to James, the charming cook who'd stolen my heart and savings before disappearing? Why would James use Antonio's name on Lily's birth certificate? An act that seemed designed to attract the very attention he'd presumably been avoiding. Most importantly, what would happen when we confronted him tomorrow? I changed out of the elegant black dress and into comfortable pajamas, but sleep eluded me. Around midnight, I gave up trying and wandered to the living area of our suite, where I was surprised to find a thick folder on the coffee table that hadn't been there earlier. Inside was a comprehensive dossier on James Mitchell, including photographs of him with various women over the years, employment records showing his pattern of short-term jobs followed by sudden departures, and police reports filed by 2 women claiming theft and fraud. The most recent photo showed him with a pretty blonde woman and a toddler boy, standing in front of a modest suburban home. The perfect image of family contentment. The sight of him, older, slightly heavier, but unmistakably the man I'd once loved, made my stomach churn with anger and grief. Not for the loss of him, but for what he'd taken from Lily. A father's love, stability, the security of knowing she was wanted. The last page of the file was a copy of an internal memo from what appeared to be one of Antonio's companies, dated 5 years ago. It documented the theft of several identification documents from a secured office, including a passport and driver's license belonging to Antonio Ricci. The suspected thief was listed as James Mitchell, recently hired courier, so Antonio had been telling the truth about that part, at least. James had worked for him, had stolen his identity documents. But why use Antonio's name specifically for Lily's birth certificate? It seemed like an unnecessary risk, especially if he was planning to disappear, unless that had been the point all along. Unless Lily was somehow part of a larger scheme targeting Antonio Ricci. The thought chilled me to the bone. I closed the file and returned to bed. But sleep remained elusive. Tomorrow, I would face the man who had betrayed me so completely, and perhaps finally learn the truth about my daughter's connection to Antonio Ricci. As I drifted into fitful sleep, the last image in my mind was Antonio's face. dark eyes burning with an emotion I couldn't name as he promised that tomorrow would be illuminating. Illuminating, or devastating. Either way, I sensed that after tomorrow, nothing would ever be the same again. 9 o'clock found me sitting beside Antonio in the back of his SUV, my hands clenched tightly in my lap as we drove through the countryside. 2 more identical vehicles followed us, carrying what Antonio called his security team. Men whose hard eyes and concealed weapons suggested their duties extended far beyond simple protection. "You're nervous," Antonio observed, breaking the silence that had persisted since we left Ravenswood an hour earlier. "Wouldn't you be?" I countered. "I haven't seen this man since he abandoned his 2-month-old daughter. I have no idea what I'm going to say to him." Antonio's hand covered mine briefly, an unexpected gesture of comfort. "You don't have to say anything. Your presence alone will be enough to unsettle him." "And then what?" I asked, searching his face. "What exactly are you planning to do?" His expression remained impassive. "That depends entirely on his answers." The cryptic response did nothing to ease my anxiety. I turned to look out the window, watching as upscale suburbs gave way to more modest neighborhoods. Saying goodbye to Lily this morning had been harder than I'd anticipated, though she seemed content enough to spend the day with Elisa, excited about baking cookies and swimming in the indoor pool. "Tell me about him," Antonio said suddenly, "about your time together." I glanced at him in surprise. "Why?" "Humor me." After a moment's hesitation, I began to speak, recounting how James, or whoever he really was, had charmed his way into my life. He'd started at the Pearl 2 weeks after I did, all easy smiles and casual kindness. He'd noticed things about me, my preference for daisies over roses, how I took my coffee, the novel I kept in my bag for slow periods during shifts. Looking back, I realized how calculated those observations had been, how deliberately he'd crafted himself to appeal to me. "We moved in together after 4 months," I continued, the memories both painful and distant now. "I got pregnant 2 months later. It wasn't planned, but he seemed happy about it. Even suggested we get married eventually." I laughed bitterly. Obviously, that was never his intention. Antonio's jaw tightened. "When exactly did he leave?" 2 months after Lily was born. I came home from a doctor's appointment to find him gone, along with the cash I'd been saving, about $6,000. He left a note saying he wasn't cut out for fatherhood and that I'd be better off without him. The pain of that betrayal had dulled over the years, replaced by anger and eventually indifference. I never heard from him again. Antonio was silent for a long moment, his dark eyes fixed on the passing landscape. "Did he take special interest in your pregnancy? The sonograms, doctor's visits?" The question struck me as odd. Not really. If anything, he seemed to avoid those appointments. "Why?" He shook his head slightly, just establishing his pattern of behavior. We lapsed back into silence until the SUV turned onto a quiet street lined with modest but well-maintained homes. We slowed in front of a yellow 2-story house with a small swing set visible in the backyard. "That's it," Antonio said, his voice hardening. "The life he built after abandoning you and Lily." A silver sedan sat in the driveway, and toys were scattered across the front lawn, evidence of the new family James had created while erasing his obligations to his first child. "Stay in the car until I call for you," Antonio instructed as we parked across the street. "Marco and Vincent will remain with you." Before I could object, he exited the vehicle, straightening his suit jacket with a casual gesture that somehow made him look more dangerous. 2 men from the following SUVs fell into step behind him as he approached the house with the confident stride of someone accustomed to commanding any space he entered. Through the tinted windows, I watched as he rang the doorbell, standing with perfect stillness as he waited. The door opened to reveal a blonde woman, presumably James's new wife, with a toddler balanced on her hip. Even from this distance, I could see her expression shift from polite inquiry to unease as Antonio spoke. After a brief exchange, she stepped back, allowing Antonio and his men to enter the house. The door closed, and the street returned to its quiet suburban normality, giving no indication of the confrontation happening inside. "Ms. Mills," Marco said from the front seat, his voice respectful but firm. "Mr. Ricci wanted you to have this." He passed back a small electronic device that looked like a modified smartphone. It's a secure feed from the camera on his tie clip. You'll be able to see and hear everything. My hands trembled slightly as I accepted the device. The screen flickered to life, showing a modest living room from Antonio's perspective. James stood near a fireplace, his face pale with recognition and fear. He looked older than in the photographs, with streaks of gray in his once dark hair, and a slight paunch that his sweater couldn't quite conceal. "Hello, James." Antonio's voice came through with perfect clarity. "Or should I use your real name?" James swallowed visibly. "I don't know what you're talking about. My name is Paul Winters." Antonio's laugh was cold. "Let's not waste time with lies. You've used at least 4 identities that I know of: James Mitchell, James Donovan, Stephen Carroll, and now Paul Winters. But your real name is David Conti, son of Michael Conti, former underboss to the Gambino family." My breath caught. Gambino family. Even I knew that name. One of the most notorious crime families in American history. James, or David, paled further. "You have no right to come into my home and make accusations. I have every right." Antonio cut him off, his voice dropping to a dangerous softness. "You stole from me. Not just my identity documents, but something far more precious." On the screen, I saw James's wife clutching their son protectively in the background, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. "Amanda, take Nathan upstairs," James said without looking at her. When she hesitated, he added more firmly, "Now please." Once they were gone, James seemed to deflate slightly. "Look, I took some documents years ago, I admit that. But I needed a clean identity, and you were the safest option. I never used them for anything illegal." "Except identity theft," Antonio pointed out, "and fraud, and abandonment of your child." James's eyes narrowed. "Which child would that be? The one you apparently know about, or the one upstairs who has no idea his father has been lying to him since birth?" "I'm talking about Lily," Antonio said, his voice now razor-sharp. "The daughter you abandoned 7 years ago. The daughter whose birth certificate bears my name as the father." Understanding dawned on James's face, followed quickly by calculation. "So that's why you're here. You found the birth certificate. Why did you do it?" Antonio demanded. "Of all the names you could have used, why mine?" James's expression shifted to something almost like amusement, because it was perfect. "You were known for your liaisons with beautiful women. The idea that one might have had your child and kept it secret was entirely plausible. And it gave me insurance." "Insurance?" "If my father ever found me, if the families ever came looking, I'd have leverage. The great Antonio Ricci's secret daughter." He shrugged. "I never actually planned to use it. It was just contingency planning." My stomach twisted with disgust. He'd used our daughter as a potential bargaining chip in some criminal chess game. Antonio took a step closer to James, who instinctively backed away. "You used an innocent child as insurance against a threat that was never coming for you. Your father died 10 years ago. No one in the old families cares about David Conti anymore. You ruined lives for nothing." "I didn't ruin anything," James protested. "Hannah was fine. The kid was fine. I left them money." "You stole Hannah's savings," Antonio interrupted, his voice deadly quiet. "You left her to raise your daughter alone in poverty. You're a disgrace to your family name, to your own blood." A flash of genuine anger crossed James's face. "Don't pretend this is about Hannah or the kid. This is about your precious reputation. Afraid people might think you abandoned your own child? That your bloodline was being raised in some slum?" Antonio moved so quickly the camera image blurred. When it stabilized, he had James by the throat, pinned against the wall. "Listen carefully," he said, his voice so low I had to strain to hear it. "I could end your miserable existence right now. I could make you disappear so completely your wife and son would never know what happened to you, just like you did to Hannah and Lily." James struggled uselessly against Antonio's grip. "You wouldn't dare. Not here." "Oh, I would." Antonio released him abruptly, stepping back. "But that would make me like you, a man who abandons his responsibilities. Instead, I'm going to give you a choice." James rubbed his throat, eyeing Antonio warily. "What kind of choice?" "Option 1. You sign away all parental rights to Lily. You acknowledge the fraud you committed. You never contact Hannah or Lily again, and you tell your wife exactly who and what you really are. And option 2? James asked hoarsely. Antonio smiled coldly. There is no option 2. There's only the consequence of refusing option 1. The threat hung in the air between them. After a long moment, James nodded. I'll sign whatever you want. I never wanted the kid anyway. Antonio's hand shot out again, this time grabbing James by the shirt front. Her name is Lily, and she is worth 1,000 of you. My vision blurred with tears at the fierce protection in Antonio's voice. For all his danger and mystery, in that moment, his defense of Lily seemed to come from a place of genuine care. It's time, Marco said quietly from the front seat. Mr. Ricci wants you inside. Heart pounding, I exited the SUV and crossed the street, escorted closely by Marco and Vincent. The front door opened before we reached it, one of Antonio's men ushering us inside. James stood in the living room, now seated on the couch with papers spread on the coffee table before him. His head snapped up when I entered, his expression cycling rapidly through shock, guilt, and finally a poor attempt at casual indifference. Hannah, he said, as if we'd parted on good terms just yesterday. You look well. Don't, I said, my voice steadier than I'd expected. Don't pretend we're old friends catching up. Antonio moved to my side, his presence solid and reassuring. James, or David, was just signing the paperwork relinquishing all parental rights to Lily and acknowledging his fraud in using my name on her birth certificate. James's pen hovered over the final document. I never meant to hurt anyone, Hannah. I was in a bad situation. Save it, I interrupted. I don't care about your excuses. I just want to know one thing. Did you ever love her? Even for a moment? He had the grace to look ashamed. I'm not good with kids. Never have been. But she seemed like a good baby. Cute, you know? If things had been different, but they weren't different, I said flatly. You made your choices. Now we're making ours. He nodded and signed the final paper, then stood. So that's it? We're done here? Antonio placed a hand at the small of my back. Almost. There's the matter of your wife. James paled. You can't tell her. She wouldn't understand. Then explain it better, Antonio said coldly, or I will. A woman's voice called down from upstairs. Paul, is everything okay? James closed his eyes briefly. Give me some time, please. Antonio studied him for a long moment, then nodded. 1 week. Then I contact her directly with the full truth. And David? If you run again? If you abandon another child? He left the threat unspoken but unmistakable. As we turned to leave, I paused, facing the man I'd once thought I loved. Lily is brilliant, by the way. She's at the top of her class, loves math, and has more compassion in her little finger than you have in your entire body. You missed out on knowing an amazing person. His eyes dropped, unable to meet mine. I'm sorry, Hannah, for whatever that's worth. It's worth nothing, I replied honestly, but Lily and I are going to be just fine without you. Outside, the spring sunshine seemed brighter somehow, as if a cloud had lifted. I inhaled deeply, feeling lighter than I had in years. Are you all right? Antonio asked as we walked back to the waiting vehicles. Surprisingly, yes, I answered. I think I needed that closure more than I realized. In the SUV, as we pulled away from James's borrowed life, Antonio studied me with an expression I couldn't quite read. What happens now? I asked. With the birth certificate situation? My lawyers will file the correct paperwork. Lily's birth certificate will be amended to show James, or David, as her biological father. Your legal position as her mother remains unchanged, of course. I nodded, processing this. And us? Lily and me? Do we continue living at Ravenswood? With me working as your household manager? I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice at the title we both knew was largely a pretense. Antonio was silent for a long moment, his dark eyes thoughtful. That depends on you, Hannah, on what you want. What I want. Since when has that mattered in any of this? You've orchestrated everything from the moment you saw Lily on that street corner. His expression softened slightly. Not everything. I didn't anticipate meeting you and Lily that day. I certainly didn't plan to be drawn to you both so quickly. Drawn to us? I repeated, caught off guard by the admission. What does that mean exactly? Antonio turned to look out the window, his profile sharp against the passing landscape. When I saw Lily that day, something about her seemed familiar. Not physically. She doesn't resemble me, despite what some might think, but there was something in her spirit, her resilience, that reminded me of myself as a child. He turned back to me, his expression more open than I'd ever seen it. And then there was you, fiercely protective, proud despite your circumstances, unwilling to accept charity even when it meant going hungry yourself. How could I not be intrigued? So you brought us to your home out of curiosity? The explanation seemed insufficient for the extraordinary measures he'd taken. At first, yes, he admitted. I wanted to understand why James had used my name on Lily's birth certificate. I wanted to know if there was some connection I was missing. His mouth curved in a rueful smile. What I didn't expect was to find myself caring about what happened to either of you. The confession hung between us, fraught with implications neither of us seemed ready to address directly. And now, I asked softly, now that you know the truth about James and his schemes, now I find myself reluctant to let you go. The simple honesty of his words caught me by surprise. Both of you. We fell silent as the SUV continued its journey back to Ravenswood. My mind raced with questions, with possibilities I hadn't allowed myself to consider before today. Antonio Ricci was dangerous. That much was clear from every interaction I'd witnessed, from the deference of his staff to the fear in James's eyes. He lived in a world of power and privilege that was entirely foreign to me. And yet there was something undeniably compelling about him, about the intensity of his focus, and the unexpected gentleness he showed to Lily. I don't know you, I said finally. Not really. I don't know what you do, who you are beyond these glimpses I've seen. Then stay and find out, he replied, his voice low and persuasive. Give yourself time. Give Lily time in a stable environment with the opportunity she deserves. The offer was tempting, more than tempting, but I needed honesty between us if there was any hope of building something real. I need to know who I'm dealing with, I insisted. No more half-truths or evasions. If we're going to stay, if we're going to explore whatever this is between us, I need to understand your world. Antonio studied me for a long moment, his expression serious. My family has been involved in certain businesses for generations, some legitimate, some less so. I've worked hard to shift our interests toward legal enterprises. But yes, there are still connections to the old ways. You're saying you're what, a mobster? The word felt melodramatic, something from movies rather than real life. His mouth quirked. That term is rather outdated. Let's say I'm a businessman with complex holdings and historical family connections that occasionally require unconventional problem-solving. It wasn't a full confession, but it was more candor than he'd shown before. And these family connections, they're why you have a small army of security, why people look at you with fear. Respect, he corrected. And yes, in my position, certain precautions are necessary. I considered this, trying to reconcile the man beside me, the man who had defended Lily so fiercely, who looked at me with such intense interest, with the dangerous figure James had clearly feared. I don't know if I can be part of that world, I said, honestly. I'm not asking you to be part of that aspect of my life, he replied. I'm asking you to give us a chance to see what we might become to each other, without the pretense of employer and employee. The SUV turned through the gates of Ravenswood, the mansion appearing ahead of us, grand and imposing in the afternoon sunlight. As we pulled up to the entrance, I saw Lily running down the steps, Elisa following more sedately behind her. "Mama! Antonio!" she called, her face alight with excitement. "I learned to swim underwater today." Antonio's expression transformed, softening into something warm and genuine as he exited the vehicle and crouched to receive Lily's enthusiastic hug. "Did you now? That's very impressive." Watching them together, her small arms around his neck, his large hand gently supporting her back, I felt something shift within me. Whatever Antonio Ricci was to the rest of the world, to Lily, he had become someone safe, someone who saw her value and encouraged her growth. And to me, that remained to be discovered. That night, after Lily was asleep, I found Antonio in his study, working at his desk. He looked up as I entered, his expression cautiously hopeful. "I've been thinking about your offer," I said, closing the door behind me. "About staying here, about exploring us." He set down his pen, giving me his full attention. "And I'm willing to try," I said carefully, "but on my terms. I won't be your employee anymore. That power dynamic is too problematic. I'll find my own work, contribute to our expenses. Lily can stay at Westwood if it's truly the best school for her, but I need to maintain my independence." Antonio considered this, his dark eyes thoughtful. "And where would you live during this exploration?" "We could stay here for now," I conceded. "In the guest house, perhaps, rather than the staff quarters. A certain distance might be healthy while we figure this out." A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "You drive a hard bargain, Hannah Mills." "I've learned from recent experience," I replied with a small smile of my own. He rose from his desk and approached me slowly, stopping close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him, but not touching me. "I agree to your terms, with one condition of my own, which is honesty," he said simply. "Complete transparency between us, no matter how difficult the truth might be." I nodded. "Agreed." He reached out then, his hand gently cupping my cheek. "May I?" he asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. In answer, I leaned forward and pressed my lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, exploratory, but quickly deepened into something heated and intense. His arms encircled me, drawing me against the solid warmth of his chest as my hands found their way into his hair. When we finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, I saw something new in his eyes, not just desire, but a vulnerability I hadn't glimpsed before. "Whatever happens between us," he said quietly, "I want you to know that Lily will always have my protection and support. Not out of obligation or guilt, but because she deserves every opportunity life can offer." The promise touched me deeply. "And me?" His thumb traced the curve of my cheek. "You, Hannah Mills, have managed to intrigue, challenge, and captivate me in ways I never expected. I think we have a great deal to discover about each other." 6 months later, Lily and I moved from the guest house into the main residence, my relationship with Antonio having evolved from cautious exploration to genuine partnership. He continued to navigate his complex business world, though increasingly focused on legitimate enterprises, while I pursued a degree in business management that he encouraged but didn't finance, honoring my need for independence. Lily thrived at Westwood Academy, her natural intelligence nurtured by excellent teachers. She and Antonio developed a special bond, his fierce protectiveness balanced by genuine delight in her achievements. Though he never tried to replace her biological father, he became the steady, loving paternal figure she had always deserved. James, or David, eventually told his wife the truth about his past, a confession forced by Antonio's deadline rather than moral courage. Their marriage ended, though he maintained a relationship with his son, perhaps having learned something from the daughter he'd abandoned. As for Antonio and me, we built something neither of us had expected to find, a partnership based on mutual respect, shared values, and eventually, love that grew deeper with each passing day. The shadows of his world never fully disappeared. But together we found a balance, creating a family forged not by blood, but by choice and commitment. On Lily's 8th birthday, Antonio presented her with a small velvet box containing a delicate gold locket. Inside was a tiny photograph of the three of us, taken during a weekend trip to the coast. "Does this mean you're going to be my dad now?" Lily asked him with characteristic directness as she admired the gift. Antonio glanced at me, his eyes seeking permission before he answered. At my slight nod, he turned back to Lily with uncharacteristic emotion visible on his face. "If you'll have me," he said simply. "Nothing would make me prouder." Lily considered this with the seriousness only a child can bring to life's most important questions. "I think I'd like that," she decided. "You're good at math like me, and you make Mama smile." That evening, as we watched Lily playing in the garden with the puppy that had been Antonio's 2nd birthday gift to her, he took my hand in his. "I never expected this," he admitted quietly. "A family. A chance to be more than my father's son. more than my family's legacy. I leaned against his shoulder, watching the autumn sunlight catch in Lily's dark hair as she laughed with pure joy. Sometimes the best things in life are the ones we don't see coming. He turned to me then, his expression more open and vulnerable than I'd ever seen it. I love you, Hannah. You and Lily. You've given me something I didn't know I was missing. We love you too, I replied, realizing with perfect clarity that despite all the improbable circumstances that had brought us together, despite the shadows in his past and the challenges we would undoubtedly face in the future, I had found my home, not in the magnificent house around us, but in the family we had created together. The path ahead would not always be smooth, but we would walk it together, Antonio, Lily, and I, a family bound not by blood or obligation, but by something far stronger, choice, commitment, and love that had found us when we least expected it.